16! 16 mainline entries are now in the Final Fantasy series, spanning over 3 decades, multiple consoles, and a bunch of different genre changes. As new game directors take hold of the Final Fantasy series, Square Enix always encourages them to make something new, something unique. It goes without saying it's really hard to keep this up for 35 years, with each game having its own vibe, atmosphere, and gameplay hook to it. So when it came out that FF16 was going to be a character action game made by the dudes who brought you FF14 and the combat designer who brought you DMC5, that was a lot for people to take in. So with its 16th entry in the series, is Final Fantasy still able to capture the magic that made people fall in love with the series back in 1987? Yeah, you know exactly how to find out the answer to that question. The production value of FF16 is out of this world. I feel like every single able-bodied employee at Square Enix was working on this game. The scale of everything in this game is no holds barred. I feel like every single idea that someone had in pre-production, the team decided to implement. This game is one of the few times so far this console generation that I feel like my PS5 is being used to its full capacity. And that's both a good thing and a bad thing. This means there's so many different things happening on the screen in fights. Particle effects are flying all over the place. You're spitting out all these different moves that look like they could be the finishing move in other games, but in this one, it's just me pressing R2 in circle. Combat itself is so stylish and swaggy. It has this awesome aesthetic with these strand spark things that are all over the place. When you're doing a cinematic clash, switching between Eikon powers, nailing a counter, just all this stuff adds so much production value to the game. It makes all the hits feel so weighty and crunchy. Little sound cues go off that indicate your cooldown is up. When an enemy is stunned, you're given this little sound so you know you can pull them down. All of these things are blended together in the perfect little stew that is combat. But the true pinnacle of FF16's production value is in this, the Eikon fights. Holy shit, I cannot believe I'm playing a video game right here. Like, I can't wrap my head around it. It's also hyped up and over the top. You think these are glorified QTEs, but nah. And don't worry, we'll jump into that even more in the gameplay section. But Eikon fights are so incredibly well made. And with FF16's over-the-top presentation and art style, you feel like you're fighting the final boss every single time. Dude, when you're in a cutscene and then all of a sudden the health bars slide in and you're like, holy fuck, I'm actually about to be playing the game right now. Eikon fights are what make FF16 spectacular. While the production value is top-notch, there are a couple things in this game that are so frustrating. Low frame rates and technical performance is pretty disappointing. I feel like it was impossible to keep this game at a stable 60 FPS, and performance mode does not live up to its name. Character design and animations are so hit and miss. Some of your characters looking extra swaggy, and then half of them look like they're from Whoville. I also can't stand character animations in general, and this is actually a recurring problem in Square Enix games. Walking animations and cutscenes are so choppy, the way characters sheath and unsheathed weapons are so jerky and kind of seem to have a mind of their own. And you may be like, ugh, that looks gross. But then you see an Eikon fight and instantly that thought is put to bed. This entire game is accompanied by a phenomenal soundtrack from hour 1 to hour 40. While your overworld theme is pretty solid, they aren't going to catch your ear. But the big boss themes, those bombastic Eikon fights would be nothing without their partner in crime, the soundtrack. Every single boss theme could pass as the final boss theme. Every time those songs start up, I go back to my menu to see if I was closing in on the end of the game and be like, yeah, there's no way this theme is playing 8 hours into this game. The music just eggs you on to keep pummeling bad guys in front of you. I'm over here swinging away, talking shit to some pixels on a screen because the music in my ears is so goddamn perfect. While the game has some moments in its presentation that can come off a little bit choppy, I think those moments in no way outweigh the beauty this game brings to your screen when it really matters. I'm personally a sucker for massive narrative-based video games, so it's not going to be a surprise to you that I love JRPGs, and it's probably even less of a surprise that I love FF16's narrative. To a point. The first half of this game is rock solid. Characters are compelling and likable, the setting is interesting and engaging. The scale and scope of this world is jaw-dropping. Imagine you grab some Game of Thrones and some Attack on Titan and they just rolled around the sheets together. This world is so expansive from a physical and lore perspective. This is probably the most I've consumed lore in my entire video game career, because everything about this world piqued my interest. Also, this little feature, the active time lore made understanding this world so easy. You see, you press a button at any point in any cutscene and you're given a full rundown of the who, what, where, when, and why. Anytime you think, wait, who's this dude? You press a button and are immediately able to read to your heart's content. FF16 unfolds like a beautiful fantasy epic. Kingdoms are all waging war with each other and using their icons to wreak havoc across the land. The cool part is icons are individuals from each nation who can transform into these 20-story monsters at will. And depending on the nation they're in, some are treated with reverence and some as slaves. Slavery in general is a massive thematic element that carries across this game. It's a world where those who are born different are immediately looked upon as less than human beings. The characters of this game are fighting for just that, fighting for a world where people aren't judged off the circumstances of their birth, but just who they are as a person. In general, characters in this game are pretty hit and miss. Your primary protagonists really shine here, while some side characters are tough for me to get on board with, though they nail the ones that matter when it comes to characters. And the one that matters the most is my boy and primary protagonist, Clive Rossfield. My god, they actually did it. A JRPG protagonist that is in his 30s. Clive overall is a great character and his evolution is satisfying. He starts out as your typical gruff protagonist, but as he starts revisiting the people and places of his past, he almost turns back into a little kid. He's soft-spoken, caring, and overall just a treat to be around. Voice work in general is top-notch across the board. Very rarely does it feel stiff or out of place. Additionally, all the facial animations complement this so well. I really feel like over the last 5 years, JRPG studios have really done a great job of fixing up the clunky dialogue and making video game conversations feel real and authentic.
Just this very morn, I found him with his nose buried in my nuts.
For the most part. While Final Fantasy Batman is definitely the belle of the ball here, there are a couple other notables. Sid is a boy for sure. The only word I feel like properly describes this dude is swashbuckler. Gav is a homie. Jill is awesome, but is inexplicably relegated to the woodwork in some spots, but her big moments are great. She also had this cute little will they, won't they going on with Clive that I adored. Then there's my favorite character, one whose heart is made of gold and is loyal to the end. My boy Torgal. If you do not like Torgal, I do not like you. It's very simple. I mean, look at this dude. Tell me he doesn't kick ass. He has a moment halfway through the game that had me on my feet clapping in my living room at like 11:13 on a Sunday morning. I'm not saying this ironically. This dog actually has a great storyline. And for a character that just barks and whines, I really love his little arc. The first half of this game feels very grounded and tight. It's very cutscene heavy with a lot of world building. And then the back half just goes poco loco, which is good and bad. It's bad because the game slips into the JRPG trope that we see over and over again, where instead of having competing factions with conflicting motivations, everyone just becomes the Avengers and goes after one bad guy. The nuance between good and bad fades away, and because of that, any type of moral dilemma you feel as a player is immediately gone. Now, the good, dude, this game's back half is so insanely over the top and massive. I'm bringing the Eikon fights up again, and spoiler alert, this isn't going to be the last time. Just look at this shit and look at everything happening here. You're probably thinking, why are you showing us these huge boss scenes and hype moments? Why are you spoiling that? Brother, this is 57 minutes into the game. That's because the unsung hero of this game is its cutscene direction. This is one of those things that if it's awesome, you don't notice it in the game. I love all the dynamic angles for conversations, or the way it'll weave from cutscene to gameplay without batting an eye. FF16's story is such a fun ride. While side quests and side characters can feel a little uninspired at times, the meat and potatoes of this game's narrative is stellar. There are probably a couple of moments where you'll roll your eyes, but there are dozens of more times you'll be out of your seat. JRPG tropes be damned. I wouldn't hesitate to spend another 40 hours experiencing this narrative all over again. Ooh boy, is this game going to stir up a lot of conversation with OG Final Fantasy fans. I'll be straight up, Final Fantasy is not an RPG. It's an action game, and with a bunch of numbers popping up out of people. You level up and you just get assigned arbitrary numbers that don't really feel like they mean anything. You just haphazardly apply skill points for new attacks. Crafting and armor upgrades are such a barren system. You always feel like you're just trying to grab 2 materials so you can upgrade a belt, and then one chapter later, it doesn't even matter because a better one pops up. The game's equipment and progression is just as linear as its story. There isn't really anything to push you forward, and as an RPG, FF16 does not succeed. Okay. Are all the Final Fantasy purists gone? Alright, good. Oh shit! shit. What an action game we have here. If FF16 fails as an RPG, it succeeds in droves as an action game. This game's combat is so fun and engaging. I mean, you could just press square over and over again and probably win a lot of fights, but dude, where's the fun in that? FF16 is here to give you a toy box of combat options, and you're supposed to just go nuts. You have so many options on how to play this game based off the Eikon powers you use. The controls take a little bit of getting used to, but in general, the game ramps up its combat pretty well. You're smashing square at the beginning, and then wind the clock forward 20 hours. You're teleporting forward, hitting the wing, hit this dude away, get back here, bitch. Raise them in the air, smash them on the ground. I just blocked him with the rock counter, hit him with the big ass punch. You're half staggering. Okay, let's get you on the ground. Go Super Saiyan, hit another counter, charge up this anime sword, and then wipe out all the bad guys without even looking at them. Fights are so clean and stylish. For the most part, the game makes sure you don't get lost in combat except for when you summon a tornado on the field. My only critique of combat is the game is pretty easy. When credits rolled, I died twice over the entire game, but with how much fun I had playing it, it didn't stick out as a weakness for me. Outside of combat, FF16 definitely has its problems from a gameplay perspective. While I touched on the rough progression, those things don't really hamper your gameplay. Now, what does hamper your gameplay is side quests. The gameplay design of 75% of your side quests is abysmal. I see this question mark, I sit through all this dialogue, now I get stuck in this screen just waiting for it to fade away. Okay, the side quest is halfway across the world, open my map, talk to the person. Now they want me to talk to another person. This person wants me to talk to more people. Maybe I go kill one monster. I just talking to people and then all of a sudden I become their waiter and okay, quest is over. These have to be some of the most sluggish side quests I've seen in the game. They feel like MMO quests in all of the bad ways. Most of them could have been plucked out of FF14 and I wouldn't have been able to tell the difference. Now the other 25% are pretty rad with fun fights and great characters, but for the most part, all they're good for is XP and skill points. Alright, I'm glad we got the clunky stuff out of the way because now I can gush about one of my favorite things of video games in the last 15 years. The Eikon fights. That's right, I'm bringing them back a third time. Dude, I don't know. Like everything about these fights are so incredibly fun. You'll definitely be hitting that position where you lean forward out of your chair. They kick so much ass, and to my surprise are much more than quick time events. There's actual combat happening here that revolves around using your abilities, hitting parries, dodges, and zipping around like a little demon man on roller skates. Each boss is better than the last. I don't understand how this game just tops itself over and over and over again for Eikon fights. Every single one feels unique and immediately sucks you in. I'm telling you, the first time you're in a cutscene and those health bars appear, you are gonna lose your mind. FF16 strays away from its RPG roots. Its side content can be a drag, but if you take the time to let yourself have a little fun and get creative, this game will reward you with everything you could want out of an action game. Final Fantasy XVI definitely has its cracks, and I think a lot of that is because it has trouble balancing what it's supposed to be and what it wants to be. I feel like the team at CBU3 were put in an impossible situation, where they wanted to build a character action game, but had to find ways to ham-fist RPG mechanics and fluff. I think if you trim off a few hours of this game, both in the main and side content, and maybe chill out on some of the exposition, they could have created an awesome video game narrative. While a runtime of 40 hours may seem daunting to some, I wouldn't run for the hills just yet. FF16 is a game that will give back as much as you put into it. I think if you sat around and pressed square and did every side quest, then sure, you may hate this game. But if you just sit back and let yourself have a little bit of fun, you get to experience one of the best games in the 35-year history of the legendary Final Fantasy franchise.